In this video, I shall be talking about Blue Lock and some of the characters like Bachira, Isagi, Kunigami, Chigiri, every one of those main-ish characters, and how a sports-like show completely based on a character-oriented setting lets the plot exemplify their character traits. This isn't a show that just completely ditches the side characters entirely, and whoever side characters are not needed, they don't get screen time, or they're just completely flat-out replaced by somebody else entirely. I just love a show that does not replace side characters entirely, but treats the side characters almost like main characters. This is one of the shows that does this, and the whole reason why I wanted to cover something like this. However, I do want to address one thing. We will stop where the anime stops, so no manga spoilers involved. Like everybody on this list, they want to be the #1 soccer player in the world. I love how this show, like most other shows today, like Jujutsu Kaisen, are basing their stories on real-life events or problems that are constantly referencing like real life at a point, and they're like, this is our spin on this legit problem. In the case of Blue Lock, they need a soccer superstar of their own to represent Japan because there isn't a good soccer team in like 40 years. Don't quote me on that. But before any of that, I would love to emphasize on the show harping on the fact that you need to build your ego. This is the main message of the show. Ego necessarily isn't a bad thing out that most modern shows have made it out to be. However, this is something absolutely necessary, like the show demonstrates later on and in this video through its characters. Most modern media have ego confused with narcissism, pride, superiority, inferiority, etc. And they usually are like a unique blend, if not all of these traits. And they just, one word, ego. This show mainly focuses on all the aspects of ego, both good and bad, and how people like you and me can learn from these characters and grow our own ego in our own lives. And learn it's not necessarily a bad thing. And the one way that the show says you can grow your ego in a good, fruitful way is through victory alone. I'll explain more on this later. It explores all the avenues of ego, and we shall go down this rabbit hole later on. Obviously, from this point on, there will be spoilers ahead. If you haven't seen the show, I highly recommend you go and see it first, and then come back and watch this video. Other than that, let's get right into the video. Talk about ego. Okay, I would describe ego as like a pseudo-narrator, okay? The anime and the manga, like, they take both interesting approaches to like the first introduction of like ego, but the manga chooses a better way to introduce ego. They first describe ego as like a crazed soccer fanatic who wants to give birth to Japan's first world-class striker as a hero. He addresses the world problem that Japan is having currently on the nose. It's not like a world drastic problem like world hunger, it's just a national problem that specifically Japan is having. So he gives a speech about this, like the purpose of Blue Lock, its role in the story, and I just love the fact that he just does what he does. He's just enabling soccer players, and he doesn't pick favorites. This is the one thing I love about these kinds of things. He doesn't pick favorites about any of the characters. Although, if you've watched this show, you will know that it can be argued that he kind of like lectures Isagi a wee bit more, but we're only seeing things from his perspective. But the author makes the right decision of using him sparingly. He's more or less like the guide angel, because he's like the guiding light for these characters of what they need to do in order to beat the system he has specifically created. Like, this man has created some of the most brutal systems I have seen in terms of eliminating and just weeding out millions of people in competition. He wants to both improve them, and he also wants to eliminate any prior misconceptions and build them back ground up. He does this in a very short time frame, which I say is more the author's detriment, but I feel like this is the best way of doing it. I mean, he says things like, this is what you see in the real world, and this is what you need to know for your next challenge, which is based on a real world problem. And with soccer being that competitive sport that it is, and he makes this point absolutely clear. Anyone that will get eliminated from this point on will be benched, barred from ever participating in national soccer ever. Just love the way that this guy does it, okay? I mean, it's brutal, but this keeps the stakes up. I mean, he's a crazy soccer fanatic. He doesn't shy away from that. In fact, he revels in that title. So the way he sets up the game, it's meant to take people's individual egos and make them shine through and never allow anyone to depend on another person. This is done time and time again from all of his challenges. That's why certain characters stand out more than others. And I just really love that element about the author's mentality. You have to grow first yourself and become so good you don't have to rely on other people. I think a really nice quote is that you don't want to be the one who's chosen. You want to be the one that chooses. That's what it's like, sort of like if the show was in one message. A little nice touch they added is that they don't give nicknames to the characters. I find that just really nice, and Ego doesn't do this either. I love how it's not too much to the point where it's just preaching, like the advice, and it's vague enough for the audience to guess how the solution will be implemented. So he gives the advice, but it's not immediately clear as to what the solution is. Like, you're given all the key elements to solve this problem, but you gotta go with this character to learn how. Even being a repeat watcher and knowing what the solution is, it's still entertaining, because you need to understand what needs to be done, because it's useless if 1, you can't do it or use the solution that he's provided to you, and 2, you need to do it better than other people can. On the field, put it on best for display when the stakes are super high and super competitive. That is just brilliant. It is undoubtable that the show wouldn't exist without him, and the method he takes in training these characters is what exemplifies this hilariously harshly. I think that's the one thing that goes against the show, humor, but again, this is about tension. Like the mass elimination of players without any hesitation. Especially now, this will keep us on our toes. This is like first season craziness. This is how you weed out side characters. I'm kidding. But this is how you make and maintain tension. More on this later as a negative aspect. Bachira, the monster enabler. Okay, my first thoughts about this guy, he's weird. That's about it. Like, kick somebody first when he wakes up. I mean, that's more or less girlfriend energy, but there's not really much to say than that he's in a monster enabler. Like, you'll understand why I mean by this later. He enables the best out of most people by these crazy fanatic passes, and I'm afraid to say this, but he can't do much on his own, like, besides his dribbling challenges. The more, like, early on, he is one of the, like, main leading forces, but as the show progresses, he starts to fade a little. I mean, he is, let's talk about his background first. He's completely inspired by the sport of soccer. Even when he's losing, he's still looking for fun and victory, which is the most important aspects for him. He followed his ego up until the point, or so that's what he thought. He thought he was following his ego, but really it was something else. He wanted to meet people to live up to his expectations and match his level of enthusiasm for the game. In other words, challenge his ego so it can be built up to the point of which he can compete in the world setting. But now, he's at the point where it's nearly about to be shattered. Like this, I'm talking about a character here. I'm talking about a character's specific ego. Like when we talk about characters, I'm going to address their ego specifically, and this has to do mainly with the plot points, because in like the second selection match on a 4v4, this is like finale stuff. It was a subconscious sentiment that was shared between everyone on the field, including the audience. He was not carrying his weight. Okay, there really wasn't an instant where Bachira, if I'm saying the name, I apologize, significantly contributed to the match, and he felt that to such an extent where you needed 3 episodes of an anime flashback to really bring out his potential. He learned that the greatest asset nearly became his greatest weakness. The monster really became his inhibiting factor. It nearly costed him a shot in the limelight to play soccer forever, in a professional competitive setting, which he always wanted to do. He had to break through from this mentality, break out of his limits, and play his absolute best to stand out and keep his title in the game, to like put his foot down. And that dribbling ex machina where he quite literally scores, he's supposed to score that goal. He's just fucking hell. Isagi blocking that last shot was an absolute cock block on his part. It's a good thing that Ito sealed the deal on his behalf. That was Bachira's time to shine. Kunigami, a fallen hero. Okay, first thoughts about this guy. He is a nice hero, dude. I mean, he literally is all about justice and all that. Who doesn't love a guy about justice? I mean, he works out extra hard, just as any other person would. But let's be real here. He didn't get an anime flashback, so he got removed. Okay, he was a character we were intentionally meant to get attached to before he gets put out for good. This is to highlight the elimination factor. To fall in love with these characters and just get them completely expelled. one character gets literally this horrible treatment. His backstory just got introduced so that we could sympathize for him when he gets eliminated. That's why his screen time with the MC, yeah, the only screen time he mostly gets is the MC throwing a bone at him. Then he gets more attention later on. And he was just simply super happy with that. And because of that, I'm pretty sure the author did him dirty because of this. Other than that, his ego was actually pretty persistent. His hard workout ethic was literally the reason. Keeping his ego, like, it was decent enough to keep Barou pushing around and block him from executing Barou's drills. And he was a complete menace in that game, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't good enough. Chigiri, the speed demon. Okay, to understand Chigiri, I would like to first explain Kunan. Okay, you know what? Forget that shit. Okay, that could be a own video of its own, but long story short, Chigiri is a defeated player who has been mentally held back because of his leg accident in the past, and he's never been able to play the same ever since. He's always fearing that leg tearing him apart. The very same thing that gave him hope, light, and power is now a binding curse holding him back. Like, the whole reason he came to Blue Lock was to find an excuse to quit soccer and to move on, to give up on his dreams. But it's crazy to me. He was given plenty of screen time just so that it was just catharsicism and an anime flashback. Because when Isagi pushed him to the side, like literally, Chigiri saw Isagi beneath him. This literally stoked his flame one more time, forcing him to letting go of any regrets, anything that's holding him back, question that logic, and just shooting his shot until his time is up. I mean, this is where ego is done wrong here. They're like, many people wouldn't call this ego. I don't know what people would call this in another setting, but this is clearly his ego holding him back. This show literally quite focused on relighting that ego and showing that ego isn't necessarily a wrong thing. It held him back. That's what was wrong with it. And it's upsetting that someone else pushed you to the side, telling you that you were useless. I don't know, there's just something primal within us that wouldn't take this sentiment lightly. So of course, his ego shoots through the roof. He gains back the skills he once had in the past, and he's just a rock star now. Okay, let's be real. In the selection match for the second selection game, he only got selected because he had an anime flashback, so we could sympathize with him. Honorable mentions: Raichi, Inagi, I could be saying that wrong, but I'm talking about the goalkeeper. The Monk, Ryo, Nico, and Ito. Okay, the goalkeeper is quite literally a Springtrap dude who does the most craziest jumps and back kicks in the show with crazy reaction times. I have no idea. I think he's a character introduced as a striker that eventually transferred into becoming a goalkeeper for his spring-like skills. Still haven't seen him perform as a striker though. I mean, this category is intentionally left in here because we haven't seen these characters shine, but they're still around in the show long enough for them to have their moments. They haven't had their time to shine like most of the other characters, like Chigiri and Raichi. Okay, he's your classical shonen protagonist, like the Bakugo or the Air and the Knuckles. Basically, all I'm saying is the dude that screams a lot with a lot of anger. He has a lot of angst. He puts in a little more effort than the rest, has a lot more durability than most others, and he's just there when you need him. I know this is what the author had in store or in mind for him, but I actually know what the author has in store for him, but I'm not going to say anything for now. I think most of you can guess, but you're going to be surprised. The Monk Kid. I'm honestly calling him the Monk Kid because I hate this son of a bitch. He's the most normal kid who's basically getting carried for a lot of the part and just gets lucky with the team selection here and there. Basically a stepping stone for the MC and maybe a reminder to us all that the last among the best is just good enough for this kid. He just wants to become a soccer player, not the best, just a soccer player. And honest to God, I think he's like the Usopp of the series, the comic relief, but he hasn't had much time to shine. Basically the mentality of fake it till you make it, which is kind of ironic when you consider he's supposed to be an honest monk. Okay, don't be mad for me putting Ryo with these guys. Trust me when I say this, like the rest of the characters here, he hasn't had his moment to shine in the spotlight, okay? I could talk about his relationship with Nagi on and on, but you'll soon find out why I'm intentionally not talking about him here. And when I say that, wait for season 2. Again, don't get mad at me for putting Nico here as well, but He hasn't had his moment to shine in the anime, and when he does, I will be more than glad to make a mention or a private video just dedicated to him. But basically, in a nutshell, he basically is the brain of his team, and everybody's doing exactly as he describes or as he has planned out. But he never takes the initiative or never does the job himself, which proves to be super predictable to the point where the audience could see his motive from a mile away. It isn't until he gets stopped by someone smarter than him, refuses to get himself pushed around, and this Isagi who pushes Nico beyond his limits, he gets one up by Isagi, and because he took the initiative and is constantly pushing himself to do better, he got the goal as the striker he's supposed to be, and he gave Nico that important lesson. So we're gonna see Nico get his revenge. Just wait for it. Ito is basically what everybody expected to be an MC here. However, I just love the fact that he's presented as the more OP version of our current main character, Isagi. He will get his own video. Like, once season 2 has come out again, he's getting his own video. So just don't kill me over an anime opinion, bro. Isagi, the pathetic MC. Okay. There really isn't much to say here about him because, like, we know everything about him on full display, with his legs spread far, with no stones being overlooked. Like, we hear his every thought, emotional outburst, all else. When we don't know what's going on in the game, this guy is basically there as, like, what? If there's no dialogue, we're hearing his thoughts. I don't think there is a single panel in, like, the manga that doesn't have just pure action if it's not just a shot to go. So with the exception to that, it's quite literally his shots or just dialogue. Okay, the one thing I will say about him that the author dedicated to let go in the anime is just the flashback bullshit trope. I mean, this guy's figuring out strats real time and is just purely focused on what? Developing his own ego, adapting it, and taking it higher, like one step above. Of course, with any match and with any show, the player grows once they have been immensely challenged, but this happens in every match, and this process is intentionally drawn out to be a slow process, one step at a time. You know this by the round robin, which was held for Isagi, where he was quite literally putting pieces together, like the scent of the goal, and just figuring out how to be a better soccer player. And I just love the lesson of the show here. It's a great exemplification through a character like Isagi, despite having no physical traits to talk about. I mean, if you don't mentally challenge yourself on a daily basis, there is no way you can grow. And of course, there's some physical skills that can never be replicated or achieved, irregardless of how much training you do so. So the smart idea for the author was to make a character and focus purely on strategic feats, tactics, and planned line of attacks. So this makes everything on full display. Like, the audience knows fully what's going on, and it's not just a cheap physical trick that can be relied upon. So to repeat the lesson in simpler terms, survival of the fittest. Not strength, skill, or speed, or anything else. It's about adapting to your surroundings, taking it all in and making it into your advantage, or making yourself the survivor to this environment. So of course, this is all done through his ego, and after witnessing everyone cry and moan in defeat, he stands there tall and mighty, not proud, but feeling great. This is his ego talking. His ego boosts every time because he wins. This is backed up by the necessary skill needed to prove that he has done something major. Every victory well earned boosts his ego. However, defeat also has the same effect, only if you allow it. It requires swallowing up the mistakes you made, incorporating that negative feeling and the lesson associated with that negative feeling, and using it the next time when you have doubt. That is the character of Isagi. He is the MC, but we're about to go into the whole reason why I even made this video to begin with. These two characters would not leave my mind specifically when the anime finished. I had to read the manga to understand mostly everything that has played out, and oh my god, am I glad the manga decided to do its own thing and not follow any of the conventional anime or manga tropes or rules. This is my first time reading my sports-based anime, and we'll see how quickly these praises turn into sour lemons as the taste of my genre increases, but I doubt this will go anywhere poorly. Let's talk about Nagi, Trap King, genius. He's a bored genius who plays soccer as a way to pass time. His friend roped him into it, and they're like, sure, but there's a friend involved. There's nothing to challenge him at all, and he gets the goal no matter what, essentially solidifying his title name as the Trap King. He's confused quite literally when other people go against him, especially when they got no skill or talent, and he tells them to quit. Basically saying, why bother trying so hard if the task is so difficult? You can't do anything about it. You're not going to succeed. But this is where his ego leads him wrong. Victory that comes far too easily for you, to the point of which it's boring, is just, your ego depriving you of any real victory, any joy, or anything like that. It isn't until he starts trying and thinking and applying himself in a difficult setting that he sees this ego grow, reach, and explore. When he sees his friend Rio legitimately struggle or have despair, he starts trying, he starts growing, and he starts getting exponentially better. And when they get into a losing position, or when they're really neck and neck, this is where his ego really starts to shine. He sees, this is what causes him his breakthrough, but that breakthrough wasn't enough for him to win that game. And so now his ego has been lit ablaze, forcing him to realize that he needs to achieve something great. And so his goal has been set as something really easy. Barou, the despot king. This man truly has the mentality of a king. He truly believes himself as the king of all soccer, and everyone else needs to serve him. He literally has the formula of his success, which is discussed in the anime, ready to be used. He has the physique to be the best, a work ethic that's crazy harsh, supporting the physique, and no one else can match him here in this regard, except for Kunigami. Watch the video. Everybody else around him are just supporting characters. I mean, if you're going to challenge him head on as a striker, you're not worthy of being on the same field as him. But I do want to say this is where his ego has led him astray. This is where everybody else sees ego for what it is, something as this negative, horrible, toxic trait in ourselves, but when in actuality, it's necessary in our life. Barou just displays all the negative traits of ego, such as the aforementioned. This is where ego is done wrong. This is how everybody else sees ego for what it is, as something negative, toxic, horrible, when in actuality it's necessary in our daily lives. Barou is just simply displaying all the negative traits of ego, such as mentioned above, insecurity and narcissism, and much more. Everybody else around him is not doing their job to supporting him long enough. They're not good enough defense, they're not good enough support, they're not good enough, they're not up to his standards. Do you see where the ego goes wrong? But this is not where the show really stands out. This show really stands out because it does something that most shows really don't play an emphasis on this. Something that I love about the series is that there's always something to learn, even when you're taking L's. When you're winning, you learn. When you're losing, you take the biggest L's. You gotta learn why you lost. And usually the answer is never that clear. So you gotta search deep down. So for Nagi, the genius, he tries for the first time in a while, gives it his all, and still loses. This greatly upsets him. And rightfully so. This would greatly upset anybody. So he feels this uneasy nerve of frustration unlike anything before. And so he doesn't realize this, but he instinctively knows that he needs to break out of his comfort zone and do better in the sport himself. And we see this by him literally ditching Rio and choosing to be with Isagi. And the only reason for him to do so is because he lost to him, and he needs to know the reason why he lost to him. He needs to get better, and that's the most important part to him. Getting better in a sport now he's learning to truly enjoy. As for Barou, despite losing so many games in a row, he refuses to learn. This major breakthrough of his doesn't happen until the very time he gets the ball shut down, becomes the biggest liability on his team, but it isn't until Isagi proves Barou that he's completely useless on the soccer field by allowing him to do his own thing and just takes advantage of whatever openings he makes. That sounds like a good thing. No, Barou is not in control. He's literally used as a distraction mechanism for Isagi and Nagi, forcing Barou to submit to Nagi, almost like a supporting character. He's gonna be eliminated. I'm telling you, in this show, becoming a supporting character is like a death sentence. He despairs because he no longer feels like the main character and has to provide support to others, like that solidified by his past. So in his darkest hour of despair, Barou imagines his future, where he is not a supporting character, but he gets eliminated and never allowed to play soccer for life. And it's kind of depressing because he becomes content with the future that he's allowed to go on. He's okay with that, but he also remembers all the people that he personally shut down himself and all the people that he forced to submit to him. He feels all of their despair, and his body doesn't allow him to do so, to submit to somebody else at that moment. And at that moment, he breaks out of hell. If not, he becomes that hell. A villain if he has to be. No matter what, he will always be top G. And that's what made him break through. He realized his error of his own ways, causing him to become the chaos agent on the soccer field. A man who paved his own path. Now, while I could talk about this series for hours and hours on end, it, like the anime, had a very limited screen time. And because of that, there are just a few issues that I have with this series, and let me just be clear right now. This is just a personal vendetta that I have against the show. It's an opinion, okay? About what I think the anime did wrong in terms of presentation. If you have your own opinions about what it did wrong, what it did right, let me know in the comment section below. But yeah, despite only having one season of anime, which is 24 episodes, which is a godsend in this day and age, the tone of the episode was always tense and somewhat stressful. I know it somewhat tried to downplay the tone by having character-on-character interactions when training or talking to each other on the field, but it felt chill for the most part. But some people either saw it one way or the other. Either it was super chill because we knew that most major characters we were going to like were never going to get eliminated. But at the same time, someone like me who fully fell for the tension never caught a breath of fresh air. It was just heartbreak. So, I hate the fact that it ends the way that it does, okay? In like episode 23 specifically, they have the characters fight against the world's best soccer players in the same selection style match, except that it's a 5v5. So obviously, they get destroyed. So why include this? And why are you trying to end the series on a negative tone? I don't understand. What was the point of it? Like, I understood the character wanted to show them what world class truly was to humble them. I can sort of see where they were going with this. But why in season 1? They could have done this in like season 2, episode 3, somewhere like that. I think it could have been better just having most of the characters regather and be like, okay, let's go over how you got destroyed by the professional. That's would have been more lively or more interesting. Okay, as for the third issue that I have, I think this could have been easily fixed if they did it like JoJo's Bizarre Adventures. Okay, I personally think they could have used a lot more coloring style or a different art style to switch things up to make it interesting. They did like what is it, those icons on like a soccer field going up and down. That was good. They used it sparingly, which was even better, but setting really never felt any interesting. I understand it's supposed to be a soccer field, but come on, man, you could just change it up. Because, like, the setting was always either a soccer field, gym, or shared rooms. So, if that's always the case, then make it all the more different. Like, make the soccer fields, like, super open or super closed. Or, like, make it very interesting. Like, they could have made it a bit more different and extravagant. Like, any different unique methods of training. Like, having, like, despite it being a rectangle, the actual thing is a dome. Like, a circular oval shape or something like that. You get where I'm going with this. They could have changed it up and easily emphasized on like the soccer. Like, I'm thinking like many people might think that choosing a different like training method or unique training method would have taken away from the soccer element. But this show wanted to heavily emphasize on the soccer element. But I think the best choice would be changing the style of the soccer field just for it to look a bit more different and unique from the rest. Also, last but not least, what the actual fuck was that monster transition / movement? It feels so fucking whack. Like, there is nothing wrong with putting 3D models in an animation, but holy hell, it did not feel right. If you look at the anime and compare it to the manga, those are two very different stories, and the two don't even compete with each other. But anyway, yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts and opinions on Blue Lock. I've read the manga actually, and like I said, I'm not gonna spoil anything for you. This is pretty much the end of the video. Be sure to like, subscribe, and all that stuff. I know I left it on a negative note. I've been influenced by the anime, but It's just so good. I watched it like a few times, cannot get it out of my head. There's nothing I can stress more than enough. Like, this is one of a kind sort of anime. I don't know if it's my first time watching something in the sports genre, but this is exhilarating. And I really loved it for that reason. So, anyways, yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Talk to y'all later.